Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. We have a show today that is in so many ways consistent with some of the shows we've had in the past. Dorothy, over the years, we've spoken to estate planners, insurance executives, people, retirement homes, caregivers, and there's been an emphasis on a lot of people who, as they age, they start to plan for the future, for retirement, health insurance. One area we have not gone into, and we are going to go into it today, is the process of planning funerals, planning a celebration of life for your loved ones, pre-planning. It's a subject that perhaps a lot of people don't hear enough about, but it's as integral a part of our living as so many of the other facets that we've covered. Our guest today is Robert Nunnaley, and Robert is a funeral owner-director under the umbrella of Pinesfunerals, and he's going to talk a little bit about his funeral homes. Robert moved to Moore County 35 years ago. 35 years ago. You barely look 35. He really, he looks way younger than that. I think you and your wife just celebrated an anniversary.
We did, 25 years.
25 years.
Yes, silver anniversary.
Well, when you came here from Hendersonville, North Carolina, and you began working for Fry Prickett Funeral Home.
Yes, sir, Fry Prickett.
Yes, and you were mentored for many of those years by Tommy Prickett.
Correct.
You've developed a large footprint, I think, in Moore County, and you've got quite a staff. I went through your website and I looked through all the directors and the people who work under you and with you, and your children are adult children now.
Oh, yes.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh, my goodness. Honestly, you look way younger than your age. You've been involved in Rotary. You're very involved in your church. There's so many. You've served as a general vice president of projects and development for Adventist Services and Layman's Industries, faith-based institutions. You were the assistant governor of the Rotary District, and also, I think, Citizen of the Year for the Rotary Club of Carthage. Is that where you live?
Yes.
In
yes.
Carthage? You're very much involved in the industry, which has become, your life work.
Yes.
It seems like, and that was from a very young age. What was the motivation or the inspiration that got you moving in this direction as a young man?
Well, it's a good question, Bill. I started in funeral service right out of high school. Did not have any thought of being a funeral director. But after graduating from high school, a friend of mine was talking to me, and he said, I think I'm going to go see if I can get a job at the funeral home. And something just triggered my mind at that point, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. So my father and I made an appointment with the local funeral director in Asheville, which is where I was living, where I grew up. And we spent, or he invited us to come over after hours, and he would talk to us. And so he spent a couple hours talking to me and about what it would take to be a funeral director. And he helped me get a job as an apprentice or an intern, which was a requirement for licensing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I worked in Hendersonville. That's where I did my internship and worked there for a total of about 3 years before receiving a call from Tommy Prickett to come to Carthage and work here. So it's been my lifelong career. It's been a very rewarding career. It's an awesome responsibility to help families and serve families during such a difficult time.
Right. What did you do growing up that would even suggest that would have been a direction you would have gone into?
Oh, absolutely nothing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Again, the friend of mine that talked to me, he never went to the funeral home, but I did. So he didn't pursue funeral service. But no, I grew up in a large family. My mom and dad had 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6. We went to Christian school. I worked and paid my my tuition for school while I was there, and I actually worked in a nursing home. And so I worked with elderly people there, really enjoyed food service, worked in the kitchen, cooked, and really thought my career would be in culinary of some sort. But again, my direction was changed right after I got out of high school. So my plan was to go to culinary school, but I wound up going to funeral school instead.
It sounds like there was a pattern of self-care from the time you were a young man to today, and it's just sort of morphed into, because it's a service-based business where you're serving others.
Right.
And there's got to be and I sense there's a strong connection between your faith and your profession.
Yes. There is, and it's not always been that way. As we grow older, we may grow stronger in our faith. We realize that it's an important part. It's an important part of my life. I've been, very involved in my church and in the community, faith-based projects in the community. So it is an important part of me. We actually, it's actually integrated within our work culture as well. So we recognize, all of our staff recognize that faith is an important part of what we do as we're serving families, because when you lose somebody, that's the first thing you think about is faith. What's happened to my loved one, and we all have different views of the afterlife, but faith always plays a part in a service usually.
So the name of your, the big name, the umbrella name is Pinesfunerals, but it really constitutes a couple of different funeral homes?
It does. As you said, I came to work here in 1990 and worked for Tommy Prickett, Fry Prickett Funeral Home. I was a young guy, funeral director, but he hired me with the intention that if things worked out between he and I, and we did, we had a great relationship, that at some point I'd have the opportunity to own the funeral home. But while I worked with him, we acquired Kennedy Funeral Home in Robbins and then Powell Funeral Home in Southern Pines. So we did have those 3 funeral homes together. And then when he passed away in 2017, I was able to take over full ownership, and then since then we've expanded a little bit with the purchase of Pine Lawn Memorial Park and Crumpler Funeral Home in Aberdeen, which now is just Powell Funeral Home.
Okay. 30 years in the business, so to speak. Okay. So I made a couple of comments at the beginning of the show about how people are so disciplined about planning for their futures, their retirement. But in your opinion, with a 30-year perspective, do you see that is not the case when it comes to planning funerals or end-of-life services?
Well, there are people in life that are planners.
Yeah.
And they're gonna plan everything.
Right.
But planning a funeral is not the easiest thing to do. It's something we put off, something we often dread doing.
Yeah.
To some people, it may be the hardest thing you do as far as planning, but it's also the best thing that you can do for your family, to have something in place so that a family member knows that when you pass away, this is what we need to do. We need to contact XYZ Funeral Home. They've got the arrangements. Maybe it's been paid for, and all you have to do is worry about arranging the service, taking care of yourself, looking after the family, just knowing that, mom and dad or whoever had already pre-planned everything. In the 30 plus years that I've served families, I've never had anybody say, "Boy, I wish mom would not have done that," because it's always a help and a blessing to have all of that taken care of.
I can see a situation where a family member is ill, maybe in hospice,
Right.
which would precipitate somebody making plans. But what about the situation where somebody dies suddenly, unexpectedly, was not ill? They are, again, my guess is they're caught off guard and have to just respond to the environment that once they make that contact with you, it's a brand new experience. They've had no training,
Right.
no preparation.
Well, I think waiting on families, serving families during the most difficult time in their life is the most rewarding thing to me, because they're entrusting us with the most valuable part of their life.
Right.
And when it's unexpected and they don't know what to do except pick up the phone and call the funeral home, it's our responsibility to help that family through that journey of grief. Ask them, what kind of service they want. And sometimes they don't know. Sometimes you have to give them the options. There's cremation, there's burial. Did your family ever talk about it? Sometimes they don't. It's a taboo subject. So when you're caught off guard like that and something happens, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and that's where we are able to take the hand of the family and walk them through it, give them options, and let them decide what's going to be best for them to be able to cope and to deal with the grief in the long run.
Before we started taping the show today, I told you a story about my father who he was 70 when he passed away. He was not ill. He dropped dead playing paddle tennis one day, and the next day my sister and I were at the local funeral home. We had to plan a service which was going to start. He passed on a Sunday, and the viewing was going to start on a Thursday. So on Monday, we went down to the funeral parlor, which we both felt it was sort of like a showroom. We were walked through different choices of caskets and this and that, and we selected one. We were both in shock. We were not prepared. We had never discussed it. And I remember my mother getting so upset with us because she didn't like the casket we selected. She wanted something better for my father. And my sister and I looked at each other and we thought to ourselves, Mom, he's passed. I mean, she wanted something more, I don't know, maybe she thought more fitting for him. We weren't prepared for that. We didn't think it was a big deal. She did. We were lost.
Yeah.
And we were forced to make a lot of very quick decisions.
Right.
It was not fun.
Well, and that's where funeral directors can help to guide a family, because if you're looking at something that you think is going to work fine, but your mom's not happy with it, then it's we kind of can step in and say, okay, well, if this doesn't work, will this work or something? Try to keep something within the budget. It's always good to know what people want and what their budget is, because people don't have any idea the cost of funerals, because they don't go out and buy them like cars and houses and things like that. And often they're shocked when they come in and find out, how much a funeral costs. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're thinking it's going to be a lot more. But we try to guide people to something that will fit within their means instead of having them overspend, because it is easy in grief to not think clearly, and maybe to overspend or to do something that you're going to regret later.
And then I think to myself, what about the families that come to you that don't have the ways and the means? That's something I would like to talk about in the second set, because and are there insurance policies that can help, or when people are not in the financial position where they can do what they want to do, what are some of the options that are available to them?
Sure. Yeah. And insurance is very important for people that are not able to
Right.
have the means available.
Right. We're going to come back in the second set. We want to talk about that. We want to talk about the different types of services, how they've changed in the last 20 years.
Sure.
What people, because it's evolving, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Generations, each generation has a different perception of the process, don't they?
Right, and you said it best when you talked about your father passing away. Your view of what needed to be done and your mom's view was totally different, but it was two generations, so you're exactly right.
And she was right to be upset. It was her husband.
Right.
And all her life, I mean, they were married for, I don't know how many years, 50 years. I'll never forget that.
Right.
We'll be back in the second set. Our guest is Robert Nunnaley, Pines Funeral Homes in Moore County. This is All Things Moore County. Welcome back to our second set. Robert Nunnaley is our guest. He is the owner, funeral director of the funeral homes under the umbrella Pines Funerals, and that's and the website, I believe, is pinesfunerals.com.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I went through it. There's a lot of information in there, but nothing beats sitting here and listening to you speak about some of the things. We were talking at the end of the first set about payment of services and people who maybe come in and don't have the ways and the means. Can you talk a little bit about that whole process? Because you were mentioning some people have insurance.
Right.
People can prepay when they go in. Everyone is different.
Yeah.
You have to have a tuned ear to listen, right? And do people come in and tell you right up front what a budget is they have, or they don't know?
Often they don't know. They want to come in and get information. Again, those are your planners that want to come in and be sure that everything's taken care of, but there's a whole segment of people out there that don't plan at all. And
Right.
then when something happens, there is no financial means to be able to take care of the service, and so they're often limited as to what they can do. If they wanted to have a complete full service, but they can't afford it, then they're going to have to look at options that are less expensive, which again, I think that is really the real reason it's important for people to come in and talk and have a plan in place. When a family comes in and meets with me or one of our other directors, really it's just an informative meeting, and we kind of get an idea of what they want. We listen. We do a lot of listening. All funeral directors do a lot of listening.
Right.
But when we get an idea of what they want, then we can present it to them. We can let them know, how much it's going to cost, and then we can suggest ways that they can pay for it. They can pay for it out of pocket. They can buy an insurance policy to cover it. And often when they do that, then those prices are guaranteed so that they don't have to worry about 10, 15, 20 years later having to pay more money.
They can buy an insurance policy at the time they're planning the funeral?
Yes, they can. So say they come in and they pick out their service, they want to go ahead and pay for it, then we just write an insurance policy for the amount of the funeral. And they're usually interest-bearing policies, so they go into an account, they draw interest, and that keeps up with the funeral home's inflation, and often will guarantee the service at the time of death.
Are there on your website, are there checklists of things that people can access so that they can at least start to do the pre-planning in their mind before they come in so they're not caught off guard?
Yes, we keep all of our pre-planning forms on our website. They're easy to access.
Okay.
They can fill them out. They can email them to us, upload them to us, and then we can contact them or they can contact us. We live in a society now where things are done virtually, so a lot of our pre-planning, we never meet the families. They're done through email or telephone calls.
Right.
So especially if the families are out of state. We live in a transient community here where mom and dad may have retired to Pinehurst or Southern Pines or Carthage or wherever, but the kids live out in California. So they're contacting us and making arrangements online or over the phone.
What do you refer to as a traditional funeral service?
Traditional funerals are what we've seen in the past, where you have a visitation or a wake, at the funeral home.
Right.
Generally the night before, sometimes the same day of the service, and then you have a funeral service with the casket, body present, and viewing, then burial at the family's cemetery, wherever that might be.
And the other type of services that you would have that would be less complete?
There's cremation, which 35 years ago we didn't do very much cremation at all. It
Right.
was, there just wasn't a lot of it. But today it's about half of what we do, so it's about 50-50. So we want to be sure to educate families on the two options that they have if they want to do cremation or burial. Cremations can be done just like a traditional service, and except you have your funeral service. But instead of going to the cemetery, then the cremation would take place. Or we can just do memorial services, which is what a lot of families opt to do now, because those can be done at a later time when families can get together and have a gathering.
But don't you have services where somebody passes and they have to, within a 5 to 7 day period, have a service and a burial?
They do. We have found over the years that sometimes people want to extend that time.
Makes
So,
sense.
and we can do that. We've had to wait a week or two to get families together to do services. Again, memorial services can be put off really for months until families can get together. Sometimes they like, better time of year or something like that, weather-wise.
Is the cremation process a less expensive alternative to a traditional casket and burial?
It is, in that you don't have to buy the casket in the vault, so you're saving there. The services are going to be about the same price, but you do eliminate the cost of the casket in the vault. So I guess maybe a cremation service would be, maybe about half the price of a traditional funeral.
And that has become more attractive to people because of the cost?
Cost and convenience, both. Yeah, for families that their kids live all over the world and they can't get here in 5 or 6 or 7 days.
Right.
For convenience, it may work better for them to consider cremation.
Yeah, tell me about Aquamation.
Sure.
Yes, I understood aqua as
Yeah.
water.
Right.
But that's where my understanding stopped until I Googled it.
Yeah.
But I need you to explain it.
Yeah, Aquamation it's kind of a more environmentally safe form of cremation.
Right.
So cremation has traditionally been done by fire, but aquamation is done with water. So it's safer for the environment, and not every state in the United States can do aquamation, but North Carolina can, and we do offer that service for families that may want to do that. It is a little bit more expensive than the traditional cremation because the process is longer and takes a little more time, but it's definitely environmentally friendly and a safe way to do cremation.
Not many states have approved Aquamation.
Well, more and more of them have. We were one of the first states in the United States to approve it, but more and more states have started approving it.
What about the people who want to get ahead of the game and who are, as you refer to them as planners, who come in and prepay for services so that they don't have to go through the a la carte menu? They have everything set, prepaid. Are there advantages and are there disadvantages to doing that?
I don't see any disadvantage to doing it, but there are definitely advantages. Some of the questions that come up to me is, well, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to pre-plan, I'm going to prepay, but then I move away, what happens to my money, or what happens to what I've done? And well, that's easy, because it's not our money, it's still your money, but if you move away, that money just goes wherever you go. So we would just contact a funeral home in the area where they relocate and transfer the contract to them so that they would have the funds there to do the service. It's not always guaranteed by the other funeral home, but the other funeral homes are going to come as close as they can to matching the wishes that they had. And sometimes wishes change. They may decide,
Right.
initially they wanted a traditional service, but now circumstances have changed and they want to do cremation. So even if you've prepaid for everything, you can still switch it to cremation. But the funds that are left over would be refunded back to the estate.
Tell me how the prepaid services work. Do you put the monies into a trust account? Is it held there?
It can be put into a trust account, but most funeral homes are using insurance-funded policies. So when we do one, we set it up through an insurance company.
Okay.
The growth on the money is a little bit better.
Okay.
Because
Makes sense.
banks have not had good growth on money for quite a while.
Right.
But I do remember years ago we used the banks for all of our pre-planning. Banks have not been as aggressive in wanting to get into that anymore. The insurance companies have really worked better with the funeral homes over the years.
Do you also find that people come in and plan their own funeral?
They do. They do.
Is that different than it was 15, 20 years ago?
No, not really. Well,
Okay.
funeral homes actually we're working harder to educate families, like what we're talking about today, the importance of pre-planning. So we may send a mailing out to the community and just say, hey, do you know that these are options? If you'd like to talk more about pre-planning, please contact us. You may have gotten some of those letters in the past. I know a lot of funeral homes do that to try to educate families on the importance of pre-planning. So, but we do it, we do it in many different ways to try to let folks know that we definitely encourage it. Again, I've never had anybody tell me that they wish that mom and dad wouldn't have done that.
With all the years in the business, the experiences that you've had, and the families that perhaps you've kept in touch with after they've had a funeral for a loved one, do any of them share with you, in hindsight, what they may have done differently or what they learned from the experience that could benefit somebody who's listening so that they don't repeat the same mistakes?
Well, I think of a good old friend of mine that was in the Rotary Club with me years ago, and he had come in and talked to me and pre-planned cremation for he and his wife, and he decided he didn't want to see his wife. He didn't want to have any kind of viewing or anything like that. He just wanted to what we refer to as direct cremation, and no service or anything. Well, he came to me after that and he said, Robert, he says, I think I've kind of changed my mind. He says, my brother died a few years ago and he said that he was cremated. He said, I never got to see him. And he says, I've had a really hard time with closure, believing that he passed away. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. You've got, as funeral directors, funeral professionals, it's our obligation to try to educate families to show them that it is important to have closure, whether you're doing cremation or whether you're doing burial. Let's have something to give you the closure that you need to move forward. That might be a private family viewing. It might be just a gathering. It could be something simple, but for somebody just to do, a direct cremation and then move on, often there's not closure there, and that can come back and bother them for years to come.
So if it's a direct cremation without a service you're talking about, but what if it were a direct cremation with a service? Mm-hmm. Couldn't they lay out portraits and
Sure.
do a montage of the individual's life for people to come and
Yes.
pay their respects?
And they can get closure that way. So, memorial videos are very popular where they tell the story of the person.
Right.
Pictures, if they were a woodworker, bring in some of their woodworking. We try to personalize services as much as possible to tell the folks coming in what kind of person that they were.
So you have how many directors that you work with? Because my guess is you mentioned you have to be a good listener. Do you all get together and talk about the needs of a particular family to share ideas as to how to tailor the services
We do. Yeah, we do. We actually encourage each other to listen and to try to find ways that we can personalize that service for the families. Again, that kind of falls on us because they're not thinking clear. But if we find out that, Grandma had a great apple pie recipe, I'll say, well, let's take that recipe and let's share it with everybody at the funeral. Let's put it in the bulletin so they can take Grandma's apple pie recipe home with them.
I want to come back in the third set. There's a part of the services we haven't spoken about, and that's the celebration of life and the importance and the spirituality. And you mentioned closure, but closure is essential, is it not, in the grief process?
It is.
Right. And you've probably witnessed so many different types of services. Do the people who come in to plan the services for someone who has passed, are they able to listen and hear you at the time, or does it go in one ear and out the other because they're in shock?
Well, you see people that are emotionally kind of stable.
Distraught.
They kind of knew this was happening, so they're kind of prepared for it. But then you see some that you really have to hold their hand and walk them through the whole thing. They have no clue what to do, and they're an emotional wreck. And so we're there to try to help them, and we work together as funeral directors to try to help them through that difficult time.
Robert Nunnaley is our guest, Pinesfunerals Homes, and right now you're operating Crumpler. You're operating how many different names on the companies that you have?
We have Fry Prickett Funeral Home in Carthage, Kennedy Funeral Home in Robbins. Powell Funeral Home has relocated to Aberdeen, which was Crumpler Funeral Home.
Gotcha. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our third set of All Things Moore County, speaking with our guest for the hour, Robert Nunnaley, funeral director and owner, Pinesfunerals Homes. And we've touched on, and you've touched on a lot of things, but the whole package of the soup to nuts arrangements that you take care of, yes, it's listening, but there are a whole lot of logistics that you have to address that the family may not be prepared to even entertain. They'll need your guidance. Do you want to run through some of those so people know what
Sure.
you're arranging for them?
Sure. When we meet with the family that very first time, whether it's pre-planning or whether it's at need, the person's passed away, we're responsible for getting all of the vital statistic information for that person. We're required to complete and file the death certificate when somebody passes away. We also notify Social Security that person has passed away. We notify our local health department, and then we're also responsible for, once the death certificate has been filed, getting copies for families. That's all just part of what we do when we sit down with the family, whether they're going to do a cremation or a burial. Those are just necessary things that have to be done. So we do that. We also have a great arrangement where veterans, and we serve a lot of veterans' families, our county is gracious enough to allow veterans' families to receive death certificates for free, so they can get up to 10 free of charge, which is a nice thing. So, but yeah, we do that. We help arrange the service itself, whatever that may be. We can contact clergy. We can assist in getting obituaries put together for the newspapers, submitting those, and just anything involved with the service. Once we meet with that family and we spend an hour or two with them, we compile the information we need, and then we spend the next day or two getting it all together for them and just keeping them posted as to how things are going.
Do you find that the services have changed what people want? Is it a traditional funeral service? Is it a memorial? Is it a celebration of life? Has there been a trend with that each generation or each decade that has passed?
Yeah, I've seen changes. I'm in my third decade, I guess, almost fourth. So I've seen a lot of change to where,
Yeah.
back in the beginning of my career, we did very few cremations. Most everything was traditional, and then the next generation was more into let's look at what we can do to personalize our service, and personalization has continued to be a really popular thing. And cremation also has become a little bit more common than the traditional service. So even with the cremation memorial service, celebration of life, whatever you want to call it, personalization is a big part of it. And sometimes that might be having a dinner, having a barbecue or something like that, and making it kind of informal and even non-religious. Not everybody is religious or spiritual, so they're
Right.
looking at ways that they can remember that person. And celebrants are a big part of what we use now. A celebrant is somebody that's trained to officiate a service, but maybe not on a religious. Well, they can have a religious part to it, but it's more about that person
Right.
and the life that they lived.
And you mentioned it earlier in the show, the presence of the internet and online communication and people who are spread all over the world
Right.
and the country has also changed the dynamic
It has.
of planning.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's also why people will select cremation, for the convenience of it. If their children are living in other parts of the United States or the world, and they can't come together in a week or so to plan and arrange a service, they can have a memorial service, another time of the year when everybody can get together.
You haven't mentioned yet, but I wanted to ask you about green burials.
Yes.
Uh, Tell me what that is.
Green burial is environmentally safe way to bury somebody rather than to cremate them, like we talked about with aquamation.
Right.
But you basically are not embalming the body; you're bathing it and maybe wrapping it in a shroud or putting it into a earth-friendly casket that will, break down in the ground, and everything will just return back to the earth. Green burial is, to me, a really neat alternative to funerals, because if you think back 150 or 200 years ago, that's how all funerals were done. Families took care of their own, and they would pass away. They would take care of burying them in the on the farm or something like that. So it's almost like going back to what we did years ago. The challenge with that is you have to find a cemetery where you can bury somebody. Most of your cemeteries now require a vault, but if you're doing green burial, you don't want to preserve that casket, that vault. So,
Right.
But there are some cemeteries in the area that do allow us to do green burials, and they're really neat. The families can be really involved with those services, and they can get great closure and have great memories of how they did the service.
So embalming has become less of an issue as it was years ago?
Yeah, not as much embalming is being done as there was 20 or 30 years ago, just because if you're cremated, you don't always have to be embalmed, and you don't always have to be embalmed to be buried. So it's a question we ask every family if they want embalming. If they do, then we do it. If not, it's not required.
I asked you a question earlier about people who have learned from the process that you've kept in touch with, what they've learned from the process, what they may have done differently, or so other people can benefit from their experience. But you maintain a strong aftercare presence.
Program. Yes, we do. We have a lady on staff, Pat Brown, who has worked with us for many years, and she keeps in touch with families for at least a year after they pass away, or after they experience a death, and we call it our 12-step aftercare program. So she will contact them by phone. She'll write them a handwritten note. She sends them little books of encouragement during the year, and then at the end of the year, she'll contact them again. If she feels like they're still struggling with their grief, then we have a lot of resources where we can refer people to get grief help. Hospice is a great source. but there's also private counseling and things like that. So we do follow those families for at least a year, and we get a lot of good feedback on how they think everything went and maybe what they would have done different.
Also want to ask you just about the big picture, the parameter of the type of costs that people would be looking at from, I hate to even refer to it as opening price, but what kind of a range are you looking at depending on the type of service that you have?
In our area, if you're talking about a traditional service, I would venture to say that you're going to be looking at anywhere from $10,000 to $13,000 or $14,000. That seems to be kind of an average. Cremation, like I said, if you do a memorial service and the cremation and everything like that, it could run anywhere from probably $4,000 to $6,000. Direct cremation would be less than that. But that's, again, I think I said that cremation with the service and everything is probably about half the price of a traditional funeral.
I'm sorry, what's direct cremation?
Direct cremation is where there is no service. There's just the cremation itself.
Oh, okay.
Right. So a direct cremation would probably be in our area around $2,500 to $3,500.
Okay. People who may be listening who maybe hadn't thought about this, you mentioned the insurance that is made available to some people who may need it. Can somebody today pick up the phone and call their insurance agent and say, is there a policy that I could get today to cover me for when a loved one passes or I pass? Is that something that insurance companies offer today?
Insurance companies definitely offer life insurance, but a lot of times people, because of health reasons, cannot get the coverage that they need immediately. And even our policies, we can't always give the coverage that they need. It may be a 2-year waiting period. So, but we do have ways that they can fund it, even if they're not in good health and they can't get the policy. We use annuities, so there are ways that we can still fund them.
But you can do that. You can provide that to them at the time that they come in to see you.
We do, yes.
My guess is that those policies are not inexpensive, but they do help to cover, and they have extended pay plans.
They do, and it depends on how long you want to stretch that payment out. If you want to stretch it out for 10 years, that's going to be the lowest payment. If you want to try to pay it off in 2 or 3 years, then the payment would be a little higher.
Okay. Your wife has been an instrumental part of your journey.
Yes.
And we hadn't really spoken much about her, but you've raised 3 children.
Yes.
And she works with you at Pinesfunerals?
She was a nurse. She was a pediatric nurse and worked at First Health for several years, but when our youngest child was born, she decided to homeschool, and so she did that, and now that homeschooling's over, she's working with us at our Pine Lawn Memorial Park, and she's usually one of the folks you see when you go in down there, and she's been a huge support to me. This is not an easy career, but it takes a lot of time, but she's been a huge support to me.
People can go to your website, pinesfunerals.com.
Yes.
They can look at your different locations, the services. You're available, I'm sure, for pre-counseling prior to.
Sure.
But they also have information they can access from the website that they can look at.
Yes.
To start a conversation.
Correct. Yes. Right. And we recommend that people do go to our website and look at everything and then contact us.
Sure.
They can call our main telephone number and talk with me or one of our other directors most any time.
You know that old story when you board a plane, no one listens to the stewardess,
right?
The flight attendant when they're talking about buckling your seatbelt because they're not over water, they haven't taken off yet.
Right.
And then when it happens, they wish they had listened.
Right.
Right? And I think it's the same thing. It's something that people should be encouraged to have a conversation about as opposed to waiting until after the fact.
Right.
Preparation is always a smart thing to do no matter what it is you're preparing for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Robert Nunnaley, it's been a pleasure to have you on. It's been important to have this conversation, and we will have a podcast put out next week so that if people miss the show, they'll be able to listen to it and pick up the phone and call and start that conversation.
Very good. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dorothy.
It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week.